Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Legendary Whiskey with Whiskey Legends. This week we've got Commodore Cody Banks from the good ship Hains Co.
Ahoy sailors.
Thanks for coming in.
Absolutely, thanks so much for having me. Great concept by the way, I thought it was great.
Thank you. So we'll start off with a few questions, get you loosened up, and then we'll get proper loosened up after that.
Excellent, can't wait.
So do you have a particular whiskey that changed your life, like your discovery of whiskey? What was the bottle?
Sure, discovery of whiskey. Certainly in my younger years, like probably many of us started off on a lot of cheap bourbons and things like that, probably with a lot of mixes and that as well, but certainly in terms of getting into whiskey, certainly single malts. I think the whiskey that I kept going back to, certainly early on, was the Oban 14.
Oh, nice.
Bit of a different one, but I don't see it as a staple in a lot of bars and things like that now. But just for certainly at the time, the price point was obviously very attractive for a 14-year-old whiskey. You're paying kind of the same for a 10 or 12-year-old whiskey. But there was something about Oban 14 that has it's just got a little bit of each element of Scotland. It's a little bit peaty. It's got a really nice kind of like Speyside profile to it, a little bit of peat, but then it's kind of got, there's a little bit of coastalness to it too, obviously like being on the Isle, so I almost find that there's almost a little bit of Campbelltown in there too. And certainly for kind of nosing and appreciating whiskey, that was a great whiskey to get into because you're analysing certain different parts and usually you're just getting one of those in huge amounts. This kind of spreads it around, so I thought that was, probably the whiskey that really got me into single malts.
Something with a bit more depth and character to it.
Absolutely, for sure. And again, well aged for 14-year-old whiskey that I don't want to say what the price is. It might be like 80, 90 bucks or something, but that's a good price for a 14-year-old whiskey.
Moving on to Aussie producers, do you have like a top three or a favourite Aussie producer? I know.
Sure, obviously super hard. And again, running the bar, we've got great relationships with so many local producers, distillers and things like that, same as you guys. So it's kind of hard to choose a top three. I'd probably just maybe cheat a little bit and just maybe take one from a couple of, maybe 3 different states. So certainly in South Australia, we've got some amazing producers. You just had Ian on before, who's making some absolutely cracking juice. But I really do love what the guys at Fleurieu are doing. I think Angela and Gareth are just doing a fantastic job up in Fleurieu, or down in Fleurieu, I should say. I might pick one from Sydney, and that's just got to go to the ever fantastic Archie Rose. I just think their whole mentality behind the philosophy behind their distillation, and also just the way that they're pushing native grains and trying to find locally sourced produce, very admirable, and they're making absolutely fantastic juice. And then I might have to pick a Tassie distillery too. They don't have too much whiskey out, but I went to the distillery and it's probably one of the most beautiful, picturesque distilleries I've ever been to, and that is Sheen Estate. So they're distilling the Mackie triple distilled whiskey, which is fantastic. But if you guys ever get the chance to go to Tasmania, that's got to be at least top 3 on your list to get to. It's
it wasn't
incredible.
Quite open yet when I was there.
Oh really? It's just really fantastic, and making some great gin too.
And right next door to Belgrove too, pretty much.
Fairly close, absolutely. And both of those places just in a beautiful part of the world. So it's hard to keep it to 3, but I'll just keep it pretty general, and that's my answers.
How do you think Australian whiskies are competing in the market, like in comparison to Scottish stuff? I mean, you can touch on whatever you want, price points, flavours.
Absolutely. Very apt question. Just today and last night there were some posts on the fantastic Facebook site Australian Whisky Appreciation Society, and this has been a huge contentious point of, is Australian whisky overpriced? And on the face of it you could kind of say that maybe it probably is, but you've also got to kind of dig down into some of the reasons that is. It's not just straight up price gouging and they're just trying to get every dollar they can. There's just so many more production costs that people aren't aware of or don't think of. We're also a very young whiskey industry. Scotland's kind of got 250 years on us, and that's just legal distilling sort of thing. So they've got a fair head start on us. But I also like that Australia, not that we don't have any rules, but we're able to kind of experiment with things. We're able to age in different kinds of oak and just, be experimental. But I think we need to define a style that is Australian whiskey, and I think it's kind of coming to be a bit of that pretty heavy port cask, maybe even coming up into bottled above just your 43%. We're seeing a lot bottled at kind of 48 and above. Fleurieu is a great example of that, using a lot of port cask, have a great kind of location. They're taking a little bit of that kind of coastal region in, so there's a little bit of terroir kind of integrating with that as well. But yeah, I think it's difficult to say. We're still in its infancy. I think there's some places that are probably a bit too expensive for what they're actually producing, but we've also got different conditions, completely different tax excises and things like that as well.
Higher rate of angel share.
Absolutely, yep, for sure. And even when it comes to employing people in your distillery, I mean, employees in Australia are getting to live in a lifestyle that is kind of like envious almost the world over sort of thing. So not everyone is having to pay the same wages and things like that as well. So it's hard to get into, but look, I think generally there's a lot of young whiskey industries worldwide, and I think Australia is really punching above its weight in that respect. So I think it's really hard to compare a kind of 4 to 6 year old Australian whiskey with a 20-plus-year-old Scottish whiskey, but some of those 4 to 6 year old whiskies are showing huge promise and are really incredible. So yeah, I think we're doing pretty well.
I think when you look at like provenance of Scottish whiskey or American whiskey, they became styles from what was available locally, and
Totally,
I think Australia's been really good at like not following the same program just to make it like Scotch or
Absolutely.
American whiskey.
Yeah,
They're
totally.
actually using the local factors, like red wine casks, for instance, are obviously more available and cheaper than
Totally.
importing ex-Scotch or ex-bourbon casks.
Yep.
Yeah.
And as you said, it defines a style of our own, rather than just going, oh, well, that's what Scotland uses, so let's use that. And then we'd be adding to the price even more of Australian whiskey, so people would complain about that too. So.
Do you have a favourite thing about selling whiskey? I guess I probably know the answer to this already.
Well, drinking it's pretty good, but no, I think the best thing about being in the whiskey industry is the people. I mean, even if we just like bar managers, bartenders, people that work in bars and things, it's just like, it's certainly in Adelaide and really all across Australia, everyone gets along with each other, everyone's super friendly, and that feeds into, I see it in the distillation world as well, where Australian distillers are just so helpful. They're not pitting each other against each other. They just see it in that one person rising will help everybody lift the whole industry up, which I think is super important. But it's also, I think it's admirable that it's gone that way, and there's just so many good people in this industry that it makes it a bloody good industry to be a part of. So I think that's the best thing, the people.
Absolutely. Just talking about whiskey.
Absolutely.
Drinking
Love
whiskey
sitting here
and
with
getting
yourself.
paid for it.
Yeah.
It's a terrible life. All right, so when Cody arrived earlier on, we had a little chat about what we'd like to drink today, and we've decided to do a comparison between Glen Grant 18-year-old and Glen Elgin 18-year-old. Now, the Glen Grant, I believe, has won like Jim Murray's world's best whiskey 3 times. Let's have a look at it.
Can't wait to get stuck into them. I've never actually tried either of these whiskies, so showing my lack of knowledge on these, but super keen to get stuck into them. Super keen on the heavy-handed drams as well. Thank you, sir.
Well, it's just enough to taste. Yeah.
Cheers, man.
Slash.
I mean, immediately that comes to me, this is just really classically Speyside. It's kind of light, fruity, get kind of like a little bit of sweetness in there, which is almost like a bit of a honeyed sweetness, but it's got some like candied kind of fruit in there too.
Very old school Speyside. Light, floral, honeysuckle.
Honeysuckle, get like the fruit is probably like apples and pears, just really classic Speyside. 43%, so I'm sure it's just going to be super easy drinking.
Maybe a little chamomile.
It's got a little bit more malt presence kind of once you get into it. Again, very easy drinking, 43%.
It reminds me of what I thought whiskey tasted like when I was a kid. You know, when you like steal a sip out of your dad's
Yeah,
dram glass.
absolutely, yeah, for sure.
And that's what, you know, it's just really classic old school. And my dad was a Balblair drinker, so he likes extremely light floral whiskey, and that is...
Yep, right up this alley.
I mean, for an 18-year-old, it must have been in a pretty... maybe a second or third
Yeah,
fill.
you think it's probably second fill. Certainly aging it that long as well, they're probably not going to want to put that in a first fill. And you can just tell by the colour. It's just got that kind of classically kind of golden straw colour.
What do you think? 97 points?
This is what he gave it, 97
97.
points. I mean, there's other whiskies that have so much more character. This has certainly got a character, but it's it doesn't kind of blow the spectrum in any one way. It's really well balanced, it's really solid, it's tight, but it's kind of quite rounded. It doesn't really have any areas that it's really exploding for me. So 97, I think it doesn't leave you a lot of room to go upwards from there.
Yeah.
There's only 3 points that you could give to the best whiskey you've ever tried.
And there's no peat, there's no coastal salinity, there's complexity, but it's all quite subtle.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. But again, really refined whiskey, and for some people I can imagine that this is exactly what they're after. Still got some really good age on it, but yeah, it's just kind of goes straight through. There's no kind of huge ups or downs to it.
Now it is down at 43, but we'll try a couple of drops anyway.
If anything, kind of softens it out even more. Maybe getting a little bit more of the floral aspect. You mentioned chamomile before. I find chamomile's kind of almost got a little bit of, certainly on the palate, almost a little bit of earthiness to it. And I think that's present in this.
Not a lot of tannin though. Just that slight little bit of like a very light green tea.
Totally. And then just on the exhale, get some of those kind of like bourbon casky notes, a bit more classically butterscotch and caramel, maybe a little bit of spice. Very, very little spice though. Should
we move on?
Let's move on. I'm very keen to compare the pair.
I should have said, this one on the back bar is normally $22. It's very well priced for an 18-year-old, especially one that's won such high accolades. The Glenelgan is a bit more expensive at $62 over the bar, but it is the same age, from the same region. Let's see how it compares.
And so this is coming in at 54.8% or so?
Yeah, it is casky.
And this is part of the 2017 Diageo.
The 2017 special release.
Special release, gotcha. Quite a different profile on the nose. I mean, not just ABV wise, but it's kind of, you're getting quite a lot in there. I mean, I thought this was honey. The first thing I just got was smacking me in the face with
rich
honey.
honeycomb.
It kind of puts that one to, it's probably not as honey as I first thought it was.
Yeah, it almost smells like iniquity actually.
It's got a real richness to it too, and again, it's not just the ABV. It's kind of punching a lot more flavour in there. But even so, it's kind of still that kind of classically Speyside kind of. I still get these kind of like orchid fruits of apples and pears, but just in a much richer, deeper kind of vein.
It's oilier. It's heavier. And there's a lot more tannin at the back.
She said the oiliness, it's got a real viscosity to it.
I think water is really going to do a lot of favours to this.
I was going to say at 54.8, it still drinks pretty well. And again, these distilleries not too far apart. I think this is a great side-by-side comparison. As you said, both 18 years old, both from very close in the same region as Speyside. This one coming from Rothus, this one just outside of Elgin, which are just down the road from each other.
It's just a lot more oak characteristic. I think it has seen some different casks, this one as well. Refill European oak.
Right.
It just says Expo, but I guess we can assume it's Oloroso.
Yep. So we're going from a bourbon cask American oak to a European oak. Certainly, as you said, has a lot more of the wood influence to it. In a good way. Like, yes. I think it's not overpowering at all. It's actually really delicious.
A great dram. So
the water opens it up a lot more as well. It's just kind of like, it's really a bit of a bouquet at the moment.
I don't know if I really need to ask, but you're going to a desert island, you could pick one of these. Which one are you taking?
I'm taking the Glenelgan.
I think I would too.
Yeah. I mean, cheers. Again, this is fantastic. Certainly, again, the price point on these is quite different. This is well more than double the price. And again, for an 18-year-old whiskey, this is well priced. It's really classic Speyside if that's what you're after. But this just has a lot more character to it. Really, it's quite delicious. It's got a fantastic nose on it as well. Certainly the water opens it up.
Well, I think that just about wraps us up for today.
Mate, thank you so much. Two whiskies I've never tried them. Ticking boxes. Much appreciated.
Yeah, cool. Okay, stay safe everyone, and remember, there's no such thing as bad whiskey. See you next week.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.